right. Well, good afternoon and good to see everybody again. Sure wish it wasn't with a barrier, but hey, we're going to be safe and we're going to do our part and everything else. So it was good to see everybody. And so we have a package proposal for you. Really appreciate the kind of sidebar conversations that we've been able to have as a smaller group, better understand each other's priorities and interests and whatnot. And so I think the best course of action is just present our package proposal, walk through it with you, things that maybe other members of our teams have not, kind of maybe been privy to hear, explain some of that, maybe might be warranted just to, maybe why something wasn't there that we had talked about or something that we had done in response. So that way there's nothing hidden or anything. We capture it on recording. And then we have a full 4 hours set for Wednesday, correct?
That's what I show.
All right. I think I'm gonna have to divide these out a little bit. This is a kind of summary page.
Okay.
All right, so in our last proposal to you was, obviously kind of a outside the box thinking. And I don't know if there's any, just in case for people who watch or people that weren't part of that, I think based on what I heard, there was some interest, but maybe not right at this time, or, maybe not for this session as far as looking at a very different, kind of that conversion of insurance into wages and how to slice up that pie. So, but based on your feedback, we went back to a little bit more traditionally what we've done. And we had some conversations around our concern around enrollment, and you had recommended some provisions put in. So what if we got the enrollment back? And so I don't know, Steve, if you want to just touch on a little bit of those numbers there as far as what our proposal is. I mean, I could probably read them off as good as you could, but you helped land there. So maybe if you just want to walk through kind of that,
sure, that
thinking.
You bet. So we lost about 400 students last year at our low point, from 3950 in 1920 to a low point of 3550 last year, which I think hit January, February in there. And we started to slightly recover as we got back into hybrid, not a great deal. So we were down about a little over 10%, and then maybe recovered a percent or 1.5%. As we budgeted, put our initial revenue projections together back in February into March. Based on what we could, knew at the time and what we could guess, so to speak, at the time, again, things are changing all the time. We budgeted for about a 70% return of the 400 student loss. So that's adding 280 students back, which would have gotten us back to 3,830. And as a reminder, ODE does fund based on the current year or the prior year, whichever's higher. So last year, fortunately, we were not impacted financially by the enrollment drop because we were funded based on our 1920 enrollment. Going into 21-22, we're going to be the higher of this year or last year, that low number. So at the time, we went with about a 70% return rate, and obviously we would be taking an impact of having dropped from our kind of previous operating level of 3950 still. So with the conversations we've had about the enrollment piece, we're definitely open to tying additional COLA to increased student return. And what we came up with was that we're still at a base of 2%, retroactive to July 1st, of course, but we would add an additional 0.5% if the enrollment is at or above 3,850. We would add an additional 0.5% above that, or a total of an additional 1% if we reach 3,900. And we would add an additional 1% on top of that if we get back to where we were before the enrollment drop hit, back to where we were, 3,950. Now we would take that measurement. Basically, if we achieve that, well, the count would officially be counted as of 12/31 of this year. And if any of those benchmarks are met, whatever that total increase would be, we would go back and retroactively apply that to July 1st as well. And then the proposal for 2022-23 is a 2% COLA. Dan, did you want to talk about the swing shift part?
Yeah, I'll go real quick. Hobie, you had talked about in one of our meetings about, well, what if the legislature, there's talk about the legislature doing I think it's a 2019-2020 look back. If they do that, we didn't capture it here, but that would be the equivalent of that. I guess it's 1A Roman numeral 5. So if that look back comes in there, that would achieve that full 3,950.
Oh, yeah, that caveat. So, right. Yeah. If they, this was something I was hoping they would do during the legislative session, and they never took action. I kind of felt like it was needed all throughout last year to be looking at this situation. If they do pass something to kind of hold districts harmless and say it's going to be your 2019-20 ADM or 21-22, whichever's higher, and we're able to achieve 3,950, so to speak, it's ADMR, not including the weights, and that's just what we're talking about is raw enrollment. That would achieve the 3,950 as well. So even if we didn't reach that, if there was an action passed at the state level to allow us to look back to that, look 2 years back, then that would kick this in as well.
Okay. Let me ask a quick question before we move on to shift differential for this. So this is the enrollment numbers attached for the first year. And you said the 3,950 is where we were before COVID. Do I have that right?
Yeah, 1920. Yeah.
Okay. What if some of these are hit during the second year?
That's not part of the proposal at this point.
That's what I wanted to check on. Okay. Thank you for clearing that up.
All right. So after our conversation around the swing shift differential and just trying to understand if this was something that you were, just against in philosophy, or just our proposal was not adequate enough. So we've adjusted based on the feedback we got. It sounds like you're open to continuing to talk about a change in this language. And so our proposal has changed from 50 cents for every hour worked after 6 o'clock to 65 cents.
Okay.
And then I think just to, I think that ensures that nobody loses money then on that proposal, because I think there were a few people that most people, it was a nice gain, but there were a few people that
nobody would lose money the first year, but in upcoming years because we're currently at a percentage.
Yeah, and we talked about that. And I think that would just need to be, kind of like we do with, setting a COLA for 2% one year, 2% the next year. It could be something that could be, in this case, 65 cents this year, 70 cents the next year. So I think it just starts becoming part of that bargaining. I think Kim's not here today, but she just said it's a lot easier in the system to apply a number, a dollar amount or cents amount to that versus a 2% into the payroll system. So I think it'd be something that we would, we understand your point, 2% on the base, increases that amount too. So I think that's something moving forward. If we move to this philosophy, it would be something that we would also need to acknowledge that, we might have to increase it 5 cents or whatever, we could do some 2% calculations of that to figure out what does that equate to. Before we move to insurance, I just wanted to touch on a few things that were part of our conversation, just to make sure, like I said, people recording, other members of your team heard. At this point, we're not prepared to change the longevity stipend structure in terms of making it an annual payout. I just want to make sure we're acknowledging your conversations. Also, if you look on the summary page, the very bottom, you had talked about wanting some language added in our contract where to acknowledge that employees may choose to put monies into a 403B tax sheltered annuity. And one of the things, both places occur in different parts of the contract. There's also, we found out there's actually an article that's just about that.
Right.
At this point, we had talked about some package or bundling that would be outside of our pre-negotiated articles, and we've decided at this point not to open other articles as part of a package. But what we would do is that statement there at the bottom is that we would twice per fiscal year make sure that we notify people that they can elect deferrals into different programs or the two programs there. Our thinking was we would probably do that at the start of the year and then probably in May, sometime before the June paycheck. So if people wanted to make some deductions there, we could. So we want to make sure we acknowledge your wanting to keep employees aware of their options there. But at this time, because that article exists and it's not currently open, we'd rather do this for the time being. I think that covers most of the things that we talked about related to Article 3. Article 4, I think, is pretty straightforward. We went back to the previous amount, which is what licensed and admin will move to this year, plus the $16.75 per month for next school year, as we are still proposing a 2-year agreement. I think the other thing that we wanted to let you know that we struck out based on our conversation last week under Article 4.2, you had voiced some concern about the language of regularly assigned. And based on our conversation and our coming to some mutual understandings, we struck that out. And so we're going back to previous contract language on that. Also, one point we caught in Article 4.6, the struck out language there, the employees assigned in positions that is read struck out, that because those two things are connected. So we struck that out. So it just goes back to previous contract language.
Okay.
And then as far as our package proposal goes, the other article that still has not reached tentative agreements, Article 16, vacations, and we are still with our May 18th proposed.
All right.
Any questions or anything from the conversations that we had that you'd like to discuss here?
Well, we didn't bring it up, so I assume that you're not entertaining it as other language that was in, like the stuff talking about volunteers and pandemic.
Thank
I'm
you.
assuming that that's still not something you're.
Thank you for bringing that up. So, so correct. Just we can talk a minute about the volunteer and public safety one. So we did some looking at those two ORSs. ORS 652050 is simply is a list of definitions of people. I don't think there's anything in that ORS that talks about work paid leave. It just defines, I think, volunteer firefighters, things of that nature. But 652250 is very specific in the people that get time off, and that's a search and rescue, a trained search and rescue person. And so whereas the 050 is firefighters, and probably depending on your definition of firefighters, might be EMTs as well. And so
I know the firefighters here in Silverton are trained for everything.
yeah, that's pretty standard everywhere, is that anymore to get inside the door, you got to be an EMT as well.
Right.
So anyways, the 250 will certainly comply with the law if we have someone who's search and rescue certified and is part of those teams. But at this point, we're not interested in expanding that provision there than the law, and we still see no need to have that as part of the contract.
Okay.
And same with the pandemic pay. I think that we've we've understood there was a demand to bargain over, people being involved in testing, and we still will have non-classified employees conduct those tests. As far as I think you mentioned the other day is related to isolation rooms. I mean, we don't see that as any different than working within the status quo of what people have done in the past, working in health rooms or things of that nature. So yeah, we do not have a counter to the pandemic pay.
So just to be really clear on the COVID piece of it. So if I heard you right, and please stop me if I didn't, you're saying that if somebody has to be in an isolation room with a child, that you consider that to be the same risk if somebody has to be in there if they just have the sniffles or they bump their head and they're waiting for their parents. You consider that to be an equal risk.
I do.
Okay.
I also think it's important for you to recognize that some of those kids in those rooms are more than just the sniffles. I mean, we have kids that go into those rooms that do have, it could be measles, mumps, chickenpox, any number of those things that they would have to potentially cope with when that kid appears on site. So not everything is, I would have to agree with you, but percentage wise, that may be a large bulk of what they're doing. But there are other things that they come in contact with in those isolation rooms. They're more contagious than the whole.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I also think it's fair to say that, they're less likely from those things you named to be hospitalized or die. It could happen, but it's probably less likely, right? So, but that's where our concern lies. But I hear what you're saying. I understand the proposal, or the no proposal, I guess.
You at least understand the reasoning behind why.
Yes.
You may not agree with it, but it sounds like you understand why we proposed it.
Yeah, we understand. Okay. Anybody got any questions before we break and work on this? I'm seeing a bunch of heads shaking, so I'm guessing no.
So I blocked out 2:30, 3:30. I don't know if you want to come back, just give us a first glance, or if we just want to go ahead and.
I think you can probably go ahead and release your team.
Okay.
We'd kind of planned to spend the time working,
Sure.
so
Okay.
we may give you an indicator towards the 3:30 mark, but nothing where it'd be official, you know,
Okay.
kind of give you an idea where we're landing on things, so.
Sounds good. All right.
And we're in A115, right? Well, thank you
All
for
right.
getting
Thanks,
that.
guys.
Thanks a lot.